Our guest today is Claire Pedrick, the creator of the STOKER model, STOKER coaching model, founder of the two books, Simply Coaching, and more recently, The Human Behind the Coach, which won Specialist Book of the Year in the Business Book Awards in 2024. She's also a coach supervisor and host of the brilliant podcast, The Coaching In. Now, Claire has been coaching for over 30 years and is one of only 2,000 master certified coaches worldwide. This MCC, Master Credentialed Coach, is the highest level of ICF accreditation. So it shows you that, Claire really does take her coaching profession seriously. There are so many wonderful things that I know Claire will bring to this conversation today. So I want to maximise the time that we have together. So let's dive straight in. And I want to say welcome Claire to Coaching Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm really glad that you're here. I know that you've come in straight off the back of you're such a busy lady, straight off the back of something else. So I hope you've had a time just to decompress and grab a coffee before you've dived straight back into a conversation with me today.
Yeah, it was quite a journey to get in, but here I am. I feel like the snow outside has affected my arrival, but I am now here.
It's been funny. I woke up this morning, I couldn't quite believe that it was sleeting outside. But anyway, hey ho. There is lots that I want to discuss with you, Claire, and I'm not really sure where to start. So, to think about the best place for us to start, maybe we could just rewind a little bit, and maybe you could share a little bit about your journey to become a coach and your motivation to become a coach. Would you be happy to share
Sure.
there?
So I became a coach before coaching was a thing and before I knew what a coach was. So I was a teacher for 2 years, just over 2 years, when I qualified. I qualified as a teacher. I was a teacher in Kenya. I came back 6 months later. I was in a job that was called information and counselling, and it wasn't counselling, it was coaching. And basically, I was coaching and mentoring people who wanted to work in international development. And I had to make it up and kind of work out how to do it because it didn't seem to be a thing anywhere. Um, so, so I started coaching in 1987. In 1998, I read an article about coaching and thought, oh, that's what I do. And because I'd spent 10 years nearly doing something I wasn't trained to do, I was looking to do some training that fitted what my job was and what my passions were. So I did some coach training, but it was a bit odd because I had been doing it for a long time and it was very new to the world. And at that point, there were 2 courses that I could find out about by researching in the telephone directory. Sorry, feels very old-fashioned, doesn't it? So I just absolutely love having conversations with people where they get new insights into their own stuff and where they feel heard. And that's motivated me through my whole career. I just spent my whole coaching journey going, it can't be that complicated. And then eventually I was running training to try and support people to do less work so that others had more transformation. And that turned into writing Simplifying Coaching right as lockdown hit. And that kind of opened up the work that I do to be really global. So now my husband, when I leave the office to go have a coffee in the kitchen, he goes, where have you been this morning then? And I go, oh, today I was in India. Today I was in Brazil. He'll ask me when I leave for lunch and I'll go, today I think I might have been mostly in England, but I might have been further than that as well. So that's my story. Sharon, can you just speak directly into the mic because it's really hard to hear you?
Yeah, it's a bit frustrating. I thought we tested it beforehand and everything was working okay, but it
That's better.
still seems. Thank you, Claire. Wonderful. Okay. So there's a lot there, and you're absolutely right. You know, that there a lot of people's coaching practices did change and open up as a result of the pandemic. Certainly for me, it meant, I mean, I was coaching online using Zoom prior to the pandemic, but certainly my coaching practice opened up then. So it's just interesting how you know, it's that coaching mindset, isn't it? How sometimes challenges, as coaches, we can see them as, you know, sort of areas of opportunity and growth, and sort of step in and embrace AI and the digital world. Maybe we might talk about that a little bit more as our conversation progresses. Now, your books are brilliant.
Thank
You're
you.
well, you're very welcome and well deserved. You're the creator of the coaching model. Can you
Sorry,
tell
I
us?
missed that.
You're the creator of the STOKER coaching model.
Well, yeah, no, yeah, sort of. Shall I
Tell
tell
me
you
more
the real
about.
truth?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
So, I was running a training course where I was training people at work to use a coaching style. And a grumpy delegate called Adrian said, I'm not practicing unless you give me a word that covers what you just said. So I said to Adrian, what word is that? And he went, Stoker. Well, he actually went stores, and then the next week it changed to Stoker because all he'd done was read the questions that I'd written on the flip chart in the order in which they were written. What you need to know is that I used to write them in a random order, depending on the order that the people in the group said. And on that day, that's how it was written. And then in the practice that afternoon, they all had transformation, and I couldn't work out why, because I thought that's weird because they don't always have transformation. This is a bit unusual. Um, and what I realized was that because we asked a time question second, because Adrian had written on his hands the letters that would help him ask the questions, um, because the time question was asked second, suddenly the question that people were exploring in their practice groups was much tighter than it normally was. So they'd say, I want world peace. That's the subject in Stoker's. So the time question, so it says, so in the 10 minutes we've got, which bit of world peace do we need to think about? And then suddenly you're moving. I tested it out the next week and I said with another group, and I went, so the word for this is stokers. And a guy called Stephen said, isn't it funny who you remember? He went, that's amazing. That's the person on the back of a tandem. So two random encounters, one with a grumpy delegate who the world is very grateful to him because I mean, it just makes our conversations loads easier, right? So I don't really want to take entire credit because it was kind of done in community. And then we started sharing it with people. And I mean, I wouldn't thank you for attributing the word model to it, Sharon. I'd just say it's just a few questions that help us work out what we're doing before we start doing it. And then we do what we've agreed, and then we see what happens and try and move it to an outcome so that the person moves forward. So that's the history of the thing. And we now, it's all now very posh. We now, oh, it's not it. We have little cards with them on.
Very, very impressive. And I love that story behind it. I mean, for me, it's stories around coaching and people and how things happen that for me is sort of the most fascinating element. Claire, for those who perhaps aren't aware of what the Stoker models, you know, what the Stoker actually stands for, would you mind just sort of, you know, going through the different elements of the acronym that make up the word
Sure,
Stoker?
sure. So the stoker is the person on the back of a tandem. Stephen Adams. I feel I should send him some money to say thank you for a book token or something to say thank you very much for doing this because I don't think he's got any idea. But the person on the back of a tandem is such a good metaphor for coaching, because it is not our bike and it is not our ride, and they decide where we're going. So we need to do something at the beginning of a coaching conversation to work out between us what we're doing before we start doing it. Now, the ICF call it establishing and maintaining agreements, but then it's really confusing because it's really difficult to distinguish between what's about logistics and what's about the conversation today. So the Stoker's questions are about what exactly are we doing today? And in simplifying coaching, it kind of goes down the list, but I've sort of changed my mind. So I'm going to give you the 2024 November the 19th version. And if you're listening online, it will be the version for you today, because it's not exactly what it says in the book. Because I reserve the right to learn. So subject, what do you want to think about today? And I like to use the word think, not talk, because if I say, what would you like to talk about today? Then you will. And if I say, what's your problem? Then you'll tell me. And actually what we want to happen is we want you to think. So what would you like to think about today? Or what's the question you'd like to explore today? Both of those have movement in them. So that's that's the S of Stoker's. T, time. In the 15 minutes we've got, which bit of that would you like us to focus on? So I think if you want the best coaching question in the world, wait for it, it's which bit? Honestly, it will change your life. That's in the English dictionary. I can't take any credit for that at all. But which bit of that would you like to focus on in the time we have? Suddenly helps somebody go from this huge thing to and several things happen. Number one is the thing that's arriving in the room is smaller, and therefore you're more able to deal with it. But more significantly, they've started thinking. So when you say to somebody, which bit of that would you like to focus on in this half an hour? They go, oh, and they're thinking. So now they're moving. So we often accidentally start conversations by getting the coach gets the person stuck. And then we're all stuck and we're going, I don't know how to move this forward because it all seems really big. And what we often do is we maximize the problem and we minimize the time. So we say, well, Gemma, we can't possibly do credit to your very large problem in this very short time. So let's just take this bit. I chose that. You had no part in that at all. Whereas what we need to say is, so Gemma, in the 10 minutes that we have, which bit of changing the world do we need to be thinking about together? So that's your T question, time. So the outcome, O, what would you like to be different by the end of this conversation? So coaching often gets confused between what we're doing today and what we're doing ever. And if we don't say today or now or here, people will often respond by ever. So what would you like to be different by the end of this hour, by the end of this conversation, by the end of our time? Really helps us make the work the right size. So when I was writing Simplifying Coaching, 2 weeks before it went to press, to the printer, I realized that we need that contracting was just confusing. And I was in a conversation with a friend who was talking about my anxiety about having the book published. And she went, oh, Claire, your anxiety isn't the right size. And I was in a coffee shop typing and I'd been on the phone to her. And I went back to my manuscript and I looked at it and I thought, we've got to talk about right sizing, which is a word I made up in that moment in the coffee shop. And now it's a word. So what we're doing is we're right sizing, we're making the work the right size. So I've talked about subject, time, outcome. The next one is know. How will you know we've done what you need by the end of this conversation? But I actually now ask, how will you feel when we've done what you need by the end of this conversation? And one of the things that I notice, and this will be in a book, but it's not been publicly shared really much before. So here you are, have it. Let me remember what it is. So the subject and the outcome will often change, but how they'll know will not change generally. So Gemma's nodding away, so we'll stay with you, Gemma. So in your wanting to talk about world peace in the 10 minutes, and I say, so which bit of world peace would you like to think about? How would you know by the end of this? And you say, I'll feel less sick. Now I've got my check-in, because one of the things that really matters about coaching is that we do it in partnership. And can I just tell you, it's not in partnership if I ask partnership questions at the beginning and never ask any more. Because I'm deciding whether it's working or not. And I don't know if it's working or not unless I ask you. So I would check in an hour. I'd probably check in 15 times. Is this useful? Are we on track? How are we doing? What insights have you had? All those kind of things. If I'm going too fast, if you go to 3dcoaching.com/blog and type checking in, you'll find a list of what I'm saying. And if you type in STOKERs, you'll find those questions. So we need to check in. So I can say to you, Gemma, how nauseous are you feeling now? And you go, I'm still feeling really nauseous. So I go, so we've got about 5 minutes left. What do we need to do to help to enable you to feel less sick? So instead of it being my problem, it's our question. And what happens in a coaching conversation is this. So if you think this is the beginning, the middle, and the end, what happens is at the beginning, you work out what you're doing. Yeah, you will do that. You taught that in coaching school. The trouble is that about 3 minutes in, they go, oh, look, everybody's had that this morning already. So whatever it was we agreed here is now not the thing at all, but it might be, but we don't know. So what we can do is say, so what's the question we need to be exploring now? So this was about world peace, and this is about how I manage my diary. But the checking in thing will be the same, because we're still working towards you feeling less sick. So having an outcome, being clear about the outcome, and being clear how they'll know they've got it or how they'll feel when they've got it is really important. The E in STOKERs, there isn't an E in STOKERs because the 3D coaching team cannot agree. And all of us think it's something else. So if you get our little STOKERs cards, the E is missing because nobody can agree what the E is, but it makes the word. So that's okay. Bear with me. The R is the role. And I used to say, what role would you like me to take? And everybody goes, well, I don't know. So I like to say, because it's normal, but it is about the role, because you can't change the R, because I can't change the word now because it's a thing. The R is, so how should we do this then? And the reason that we're asking, how should we do this, is because we're saying, because we don't have to do it my way. Because in most conversations, people think that the person who is facilitating the conversation is more powerful than they are, and therefore they will always do it their way. So unless I do something dramatically different, the person that I'm working with thinks they have to do it my way, and I'm saying you don't have to do it my way. So how should we do this? Most people will go, I don't know. And I go, that's fine. Let's see how we get on and work it out together. Then when I check in 5 minutes in and say, is this useful? They can go, no, Claire, it's not useful at all. And I can go, let's think about another way then, shall we? Yeah. Because you're offering, you're just suggesting that it doesn't have to be this way. This is a negotiated way of working together. And then S, which I think is really important, is where should we start? So most often I hear the coach say, let's start by you telling me everything that's ever gone on in this very big problem. And they start going backwards. And we just agreed we were going forwards. And now we're going this way. Where should we start is another question that gets people to think. They go, oh, where shall we start? Oh, yeah. Start by asking me this. So I'm now give you the next best question after which bit. Okay, so the number one best question in coaching is which bit. The number two best question is go on then. Because I say, where should we start? And you say, start by asking me about this. Off you go. Go on then. So right now, I'm not anxious. We've worked out together what we're doing. And that means that we know if we're not doing what we agreed, and then we can agree to do something different. But the clearer we are, and the more the work is the right size, the easier it is to go deeper. So I will hear coaches in 2 hours get to the heart of the matter, but you could have got to the heart of the matter in the first 10 minutes if only you'd asked them what it was. And actually, one of the things that I get frustrated about is coaches who say, I love being curious. I don't care if you love being curious. This is not about you. This is about supporting them to do some really good work. And you want them to be curious. Can you see? It's about them being curious about their stuff. And our role is to support them to be curious, not for me to be curious. Otherwise, this is what happens. So you've got your lovely person with all their beautiful, wonderful things. And you do every single thing you were told in coaching school, which is to ask open questions. Okay. So this is the beginning of the conversation. And for me, coaching is a conversation where somebody feels heard and seen and felt and gets new insights into their own stuff. And here's what happens when we ask really good open questions without doing the right sizing. You talk about your stuff and I ask you a lovely open question and you tell me some stuff. Then I say, tell me more. So you do. Then I say, oh, say a bit more about that. Just a little bit more. Okay, we're now at the end of the conversation. I know all about them. What a wonderful thing that is. It satisfied my curiosity. They have no new insight. That's not what coaching is about. Coaching is about them getting new insight. And they are the only person who knows how to do that because we don't know what they know already unless we ask them. And if we ask them, they still won't get new insight. We'll just know what they know already. So we have to make a really big shift. So that's why I wrote my books. Sorry, I just got a bit carried away there.
Claire, it was absolutely brilliant. And hearing you talk and your passion and everything, just solidifies everything that I see you do and what you do and read about you doing. So it's that authentic walking of the talk. So thank you. No apology needed or necessary.
Thank
And
you.
we can see how important it is to get to the heart of the matter, well, for what the client thinks or feels the heart of the matter is. And that checking in is so important, isn't it? So that's my favorite question, actually. Checking in with the client. So what new insights are you gaining or have you gained? And giving yourself permission to be able to ask those questions is invaluable. And I think, checking in with the client is important.
Can I just say something about new insights?
Mm.
You need to ask them what insights they've had before you think they have had any. So coaches don't check in because as the conversation goes on, our anxiety rises. So if we don't check in at all, we never check in because by the end we go, was I any good at all today? I can't ask a checking in question. I'll say to people, what insights have you had so far in the first 5 minutes? And I will expect them to say, I haven't had any. But usually they say they have.
Mm.
But I'll say, what insights have you had so far? Because what I'm saying is, because if you haven't had any, we can work out how to do it, what to do so that you do get some.
Yeah.
We're raising the expectation that insights will be coming. But I don't care if you say you haven't got any after 5 minutes, because it doesn't matter. Because we've got plenty of time left. And then instead of it being my responsibility, it's our responsibility.
Mm, love that.
And isn't that beautiful? Yes, it
Absolutely.
does
And
presuppose that they will have insights, but it's also suggesting that we hope they will. Because actually, if they don't have insights, I'm not sure that over time it's coaching, because
yeah.
coaching is about them having new insights. So the book's called Simplifying Coaching. And that's all well, there's pages and pages of you. I write all over it. This is all my new learning. That's the problem with writing a book. You then learn.
Claire, what I love is that you are a self sort of confession around writing in books. I thought I was the only one. So I'm glad I'm not the only one who writes in books. I write all over books that I'm reading. And with that in mind, I actually have your new book here, which I have written in. The wonderful book, The Human Behind the Coach, which you recently won an award in the best category, if I recall correctly.
The
Um,
specialist business book.
Thank you. And congratulations, by the way, well deserved.
Thank
I've
you.
read it, I love it. Tell us a bit more about how that felt receiving that award for your second book, your second work.
It was really, the publisher just went, apply for this book award. And you just, you know, other things are going on. I've got other bits of work, did what I was told. We did what we were told, because I co-wrote that one. And then we were told we were shortlisted. That was kind of nice. Got my blingy dress. When I got to the awards, my co-author wasn't able to come. When I got to the awards, I suddenly realized how big it was, because there were some really big hitting publishers there. And the specialist business book was nearly last. And she does the little speechy thing, and you're thinking, is it us? Is it us? And then she goes, and the specialist business book is The Human Behind the Coach. It was absolutely overwhelming. And then she said some really lovely words that I didn't hear, because, of course, everybody's clapping and you're walking up to the front. And all I heard was her say at the end, everyone. And I thought to myself afterwards, I wonder what she actually said. And then the awards people put it on LinkedIn. And what she actually said was that this book isn't just for coaches, it's for everyone, because it's about the human behind the leader, the human behind everything. And that was such an amazing thing. And the other thing that she said, which was completely overwhelming, is half the points are on the quality of the writing. I think if I'd known that, we probably wouldn't have submitted it. Because that's like English lesson. So I don't know if anyone's of the age. My English teacher at school wrote The Home Farm Twins, which was a TV show that some of your children might have watched years ago. She also told me I couldn't write. So I'd got all sorts of demons in the background about writing. So to be given half the points on the quality of the writing and the cover and all sorts of other beautiful things was amazing. Amazing.
Oh, congratulations. And isn't it interesting how, the labels or the imprinting that we often receive as children follow us into adulthood, and actually, through coaching, through development, actually we're able to start to continue, I should say, really, to peel off those layers.
Yeah.
Um, one of my favorite chapters is all around control
Ah.
and not knowing. That was a revelation for me for lots of reasons. And as you say, sort of continued learning. It sort of relates back to what you were talking about earlier, when you were explaining the Stoker's model. Um, would you mind just expanding on that a little bit, and why not knowing and control is important?
So there's a quote in Simplifying Coaching from a psychotherapist called Nigel Wellings that says, never know first, never know better, never think you know. Never know first, never know better, never think you know. However much I know about the person that I'm working with, I hardly know anything. And it's not my work. It's their work to do. And actually, however much I know, it isn't really going to support me to be more useful because I still don't know everything. And going back to the idea that people are used to having different kinds of conversations, people always think that we will do this better than they will. Well, not all of them, but many people that we coach think that we have a better idea how to do this than they do. And actually, we don't. But if we think we do, then they will defer to us and they will give us power. And then we're trying desperately to push that power away and we just get really, really tangled up. So not being in control and not knowing is a stance. It's how we are in the room. And to start with, sometimes we might have to fake it. Yeah. People will read that, but over time we get more confident at not knowing. So I will now go into a training session. So I've got one at 1:30, and I'll say to them, I have no idea what we're going to do today, because I honestly don't. And that's how I go into every single coaching session. So I have prepared for a coaching session for 35 years and no time at all. Because I don't know what's going to be useful today, because I don't know where you are, what's happened, and all of those things. We've just got to work it out together. And one of the things that I'm noticing now is if the coach even makes a slight movement to look as though they're going to speak, the thinker will stop thinking and defer to the coach. So not knowing needs to be really still and enabling the other person to do the work. Let me tell you, I did a coaching demo last week in India, and it was so funny because everyone's taking notes like you are. And we start doing the work, and he closed his eyes. But just before he closed his eyes, he went, "It's this." So I recognize that that might be a good question, probably better than any question that will come out of my mouth, because it seems as though it's about this. So I just raised that to make it a question, and he shut his eyes and was doing some thinking. So I had to be completely still, because if I'd moved, I would have interrupted his flow of thinking. And if he'd heard me make any sound at all, it would have interrupted his flow of thinking. And he was kind of inside his head for about 3 or 4 minutes, at which point I'm thinking, number one, I can't move, because if I move now, it's going to disturb the flow. And the other one is, I have to get rid of this hand. So I'm trying to get like this. Because if I'd done that, he'd have come back into my sphere of consciousness. So that was so funny. And afterwards they went, "Why did you freeze?" And I said, "Well, I froze because he was busy. And while he was busy, I had to let him be busy and not interrupt." So often as coaches, we interrupt people's thinking, and we need to stop it.
Mm. And a couple of things there that really resonated with me. First of all, a comfortableness, that is even a word, of vulnerability, in the fact that actually you're comfortable in not knowing, and that's such an important place to be. And also the emphasis to me on the power of silence. We sort of, there's a lot, I think, when we go through coach education, particularly in the early days, and rightly so, because we've got that conscious competence. We're still sort of, consciously doing what we've learned, going through the steps. But we sort of logically know the power of silence. But to be actually in that, and you demonstrated that so beautifully in the power of silence there, and being comfortable in that space, that's sort of where the magic really starts to happen. So, chapter on silence, guys, if you haven't read the book, and the power of that.
And it's only silence if we're not doing anything. So it's not silence if we're thinking about what to do next. If we're reading notes, silence is only silence when it's silent. Well, that'll make a nice soundbite. Can I just
Good.
pick up this great question from Daniela?
Please
Daniela said,
do,
I was
yes.
always taught not to use we or are in questions because it disempowers the coachee and take. Can I just change coachee? I don't like coachee because I think it's a power word. It disempowers the person and takes some responsibility away from them. I was observing this morning some people coaching, and one of them asked a question using you, and it really was painful because it felt as though the thinker had suddenly got alone in their space. So I use we for what we're doing here in this space, and you for everything else. Because for me, we're together, right, in this conversation. So surely we're we. Because if you're you in this conversation, then it feels like I'm slightly outside of it, and that's a very odd thing. So for me, it's we for process, what we're doing together, and you for action.
Great question. Thank you, Daniela, for asking that. And Claire, perfect response. Thank you. Book also, so you can tell that I'm fascinated by the book, but the book also focuses on, which I think for me was what pulled me towards the book, because it has a slightly different focus, in as much as, from my perspective anyway, how coaches need to transform themselves first. Can you expand a little bit more on what you mean by that to those people that are listening today or on the replay?
The industry says fill your head and do a little bit with your body and something about your emotions. But actually, all the characteristics that make for great coaching are based on how we are in the room, not what we do. So anyone here who's had a tricky life, you will already have done a huge amount of work towards being a really great coach. Because if you can hold stuff that's difficult, you are more likely to be able to hold the coaching space. I'm not recommending that you go and have a difficult life. But if you have had a difficult life, then that will move together. So the human behind the coach, we wrote it for many reasons, and one of the reasons was people were saying that they loved simplifying coaching, but they couldn't do it because they wanted to lead. So part of writing it was to say, actually, there are some things that we need to work on ourselves that support us not to lead. And it's funny because my father died just after the book was after the book was printed, but before the launch date. And I spent the night he died with him in his room on the bed. And every single thing that I've learned through the whole of the last 35 years of coaching was necessary. Because I was able to hold his hand and say to him, we've got this. And absolutely believe it. And I felt that everything that I learned there moved there, but also everything I learned there moved here in the most extraordinary way. And it felt like just as the book was coming out, it was my have you really got this thing? And I appreciate that might have triggered some people. And if it has, I stand with you, because these are things that happen for all of us in life. But it's those life experiences that make us into the coaches that we are. Because I couldn't control that. He couldn't control that. But what he needed more than anything else in that moment was for me to know that this was going to be okay, and for me not to be pretending. And it was my calm. I know my calm fueled his calm, and his calm fueled my calm. And we co-created that in that moment. And so when the book came out in the launch thing, I said something about that because I thought actually that's probably the proudest work I have ever done. Because you never know in a conversation whether you're not making it up a bit. Well, do you know what I mean? Because the other I don't think I am, but in that real moment, which a visceral not knowing and not being in control and being courageous and being vulnerable and being silent and all the things in all the chapters, that was when I knew, not that I've arrived, because I haven't arrived, but I thought, yeah, well done. Well done. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Claire. It's really beautiful and open. Thank you. It's very powerful. Lots there for us to take away on so many levels. And we bring who we are into the coaching room. And that's why it's important for us to be comfortable with who we are and to keep working on ourselves through supervision. We haven't even had a chance to talk about supervision, Claire, and time's ticking away. Maybe we can have a think about chatting about supervision and the importance of that next time. But this is, guys who are here today, this is the type of thing that we're able to take to coaching supervision as well to work through so that we're comfortable with whom we are when we walk into coaching or open up a virtual coaching session. So we're not bringing our stuff to the coach conversation and we can be completely present with our clients. With that in mind, Claire, I do hope that you would join us again next time because there are lots of things that are sort of, questions that I want to ask and time is sort of ticking away. And in the last sort of few moments, I wonder if you'd be kind enough just to sort of support in the way that we usually finish coaching conversations, and that is by sort of asking my guests to share something that maybe they feel that those listening today can incorporate either for themselves as a coach or into their coaching, or something for people listening today to take away and action. All that in 4 minutes.
And of course, I haven't prepared for that because Sharon said, I'm going to give you the questions in advance. And I went, no, I'd rather be spontaneous in the moment. So just
I
give me a
haven't even
moment.
prepared myself today. There you are, Claire. We were both in the moment.
I think what I want to say to all of you is don't dive into the work until you've worked out together what you're doing. And that's what the right sizing is about that we've been talking about, because that will make all of the work deeper, more useful, more productive. And can I also say, Sharon, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, then there's a resource that I'm happy to share with you. Just say you were here and I'll let you have it.
Claire, that's really generous of you, as I knew you would be, because you are a very generous person. And we had a lovely conversation, didn't we, before today, just to sort of talk through what we weren't going to talk through.
And I was in the middle of a really good story and your internet got cut off. But anyway, we can pick that up another time.
I hope so, because it was such an interesting conversation. And then my internet crashed, and then that was it. I couldn't find the end of the story.
Can I just share something here first? I'm so
Please.
excited. So I host a podcast called The Coaching In, and I came across a guy called Oscar Trimboli who wrote How to Listen, who's big Mr. Listening. And he came up to the podcast and we did a great podcast. And then he came back to me and he said, I'm sure we can lean in and learn things that we don't know about listening. Let's do another one. So on Monday, we are launching an extended podcast. Our podcasts are 30 minutes. This one is 2 hours and 55 minutes. And it's a pulling together of some amazing stuff about listening. But I think one of the things that I want to offer to you is listen to it, because a lot of what it's about is how we are in the room with someone else. And the thing that struck me most from the first podcast with Oscar was that I thought if I could make my presence be as extraordinary as his, that would be a really amazing thing. And then we did it again and kind of showed the working out as we were going. It's very exciting. I recommend it. All free. The Coaching In.
Ah, please do. I listen to a great podcast, avid podcast listener, and I often listen to Claire. She's on my sort of list, and I listen to her coaching podcast. So I highly recommend. Claire, thank you so much for your generous sharing today. And if you aspire to be like Oscar, then my aspiration is to follow in your footsteps, Claire, because whenever we talk and whenever I read anything that you are associated with, I always come away so inspired and realize how much the journey and the growth and where it can take us. So thank you for your time today, Claire, and your
Thank you.
generous sharing. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. I look forward to you joining me next month. But from me, from Claire, from Catherine, and from the whole team here at the Coaching Academy, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.